Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and I have been thinking about different things, so I have a lot to say, and I don't know what I'm going to say. I just know that I have a lot to say. It's about two different videos, or two different channels, and one of them is Exerbia. I already made a video about Exerbia's video about absurdism. But here I'm making a video about his video on consciousness, which is a great video. Check it out, it's down there in the description. It's a video about consciousness and how do we, the fact that we don't know what consciousness, how do the sensory input and output, how is that connected to our consciousness? How is that connected to how we experience things? Because we can describe things, but we can never really describe our personal subjective experiences, the quality of our experiences. And he calls it the qualia. Like how does love feel like? You know, what does blue feel like? You know, you see blue, you see the wavelengths, but how can you know that your blue is not different than somebody else's blue? The name of the video is does orange even exist? You know, maybe orange doesn't exist. We just interpret the same wavelengths as orange because we've been taught that wavelength is orange. But maybe the way that I experience orange might be totally different than how you experience orange. And you wouldn't know because we'd say, well, we both think that orange is orange, you know? You wouldn't know. And we still don't know how the synapses, the neurons in our brain, how the smell cells in our nose fit with the brain. They're doing a lot of interesting research about smell right now because of COVID. I actually sent one of my patients to Karolinska, the research center in Stockholm, because they're still doing research about like what is smell? Why do people who have COVID then discover that smell, that stuff that they liked, the smell of, suddenly smells like garbage, you know? That happened to a lot of people, that like suddenly food smells like garbage or like gasoline, and that doesn't make for a pleasant experience. So it's the experience. Like, how can we get there? You can't explain it with just, you know, dopamine, adrenaline, serotonin. You can't explain it with electrical signals in the brain. You can't explain it with the receptors in the fingers or the cones and the sticks in your eyes. You only, at a certain point, the link between the materialistic world and the non-materialistic world it's hard to connect. So if everything were just chemical reactions, some people operate that way and they say like love is just chemical reactions. But like, why do you feel that your heart is fluttering when actually nothing is fluttering in your chest? Your heart is still pumping as usual, you know? Maybe your heart will go a little bit faster or slower or feel like it skips a beat. But what is actually happening? Is it something physical that's actually happening, or is it just you, like your brain, your nerves, indicating something through a physical reaction? It's really interesting because that's where the study of pain comes in. Like, a lot of people have pain without actually having a damage to any part of that body. People with fibro and with other kinds of diagnoses about pain. And it's not like they're imagining the pain. The receptors are telling the person that they're in pain, but there is no damage, to the nerves or anywhere. And pain is such a subjective experience. So the subjective and the objective, and I think that in that way, this video about consciousness is related to MBTI. Because FI and SI are, I think, the functions that are most in tune with that connection between the outside world and the inner experience. Because the inner experience is such an important thing if you have FI or SI. I think more than any other function. I can't decide whether if it's FI or if it's SI that's most in tune with this. It depends on how you mean. Because SI will be most in tune with how physical reactions are a part of you. Like the feeling of having eaten food. I keep saying this to my INFJ friend. He just can't get it. he doesn't really get that SI satisfaction of having eaten a good meal. That's how I would describe SI. It's like feeling hungry and then like feeling good after feeling so hungry. Then you feel good after having eaten. And it's not an emotion, it's just there, and you're like, oh, like it's a kind of calm that comes over you when you've eaten, or when you wake up from a good night's sleep and you're feeling well rested. It's kind of, so the sensations in your body and your experience of life is very coupled in that time. And FI is about your emotions. So you experience your emotions. And you can't explain them very well because it doesn't come out, It's inside you. And it is affected by having eaten lunch and all that kind of stuff. Your mood is affected by your physical body. And you feel your emotions inside your body. They can also be in your head. But the feelings encompass all of you. And they cannot be explained by just chemical reactions. Because as an FI user, you'll be tying your identity, your values to it. So I think that the people who would be most in tune with this kind of thing would ironically be INFPs and ISTJs. In that way, we can be the same because we have we have both of those functions as close as highest possible in the stack. We have it in first and third position. And like any gets us out of all of this, and like we can imagine 10,000 ways that orange could be different for other people, but in the end, like orange is like this for us, and that's it, and we're very connected to the fact that this is orange to us. If we like the color orange, or if we dislike the color orange, it will be even more like this is how orange is, and that's how it gets fixed in our memory, so that was pretty interesting how cognition and consciousness and experience, and how is that tied to the materialistic world that can be explainable. This is like more the realm of psychology, where things aren't really explainable on the molecular sense. You could say that, a panic attack is fight or flight, but like, why do you feel like why do you have the thought that you're going to die, when you have a panic attack? Well, you could say that's because you have no breath and such. But why do you even have any, like, it's really weird when you think about it, And I can never explain it to my patients, so, but it's like, why do some people like certain kinds of foods and other people dislike those kinds of foods? And it's like, well, we're eating the same food, technically it's the same. The only difference is our memory of it, but they can also be the same for foods that we've never tasted before. But it could be linked to a memory of another food that is similar. And so that's how FI and SI works. And I think that that's why it's the closest to consciousness. Or to consciousness, at least to our experience and how the physical world alters our experience. I think NI is much more of a greater scope of humanity rather than just like the sensory world that we inhabit. It's a lot bigger about seeing patterns outside of the body. So in a way, it's more about like the human consciousness in general, rather than just your conscience, your experience, their subjective experience of the world. So I think that, and it's the same with TI, it's more disconnected from the subject in that, well, you can logic your way about like, oh, well, orange is a certain wavelength, but that doesn't deny the fact that everybody has a certain feeling coupled to certain colors, Why do people have favorite colors? That's the kind of question that is really interesting for an INFP, I think. Like, why do people have favorite colors? Why is your favorite color yellow while your favorite color is blue? That's super interesting. I don't know why it's like this. I don't know if I've said this before on this channel, but I've been thinking about, like, if I could do research on a topic, I'd be doing about how different languages interpret feelings in the body. I think that would be a really interesting topic, but I don't know how you would make a study about it. I'd also have to study more about linguistics. But the fact that, there are certain tribes that that don't have right and left. They only have north, south, east, west in their language. And it's the same with how Muslims need to know where Mecca is, It's an important thing to them to know that. And so you start adapting your way of experiencing the world because things are important to different people. And so your sense of direction will be different if you are raised in different cultures. Your sense of time will be different. In Swedish, you have a word for tomorrow morning. You have a specific word for tomorrow morning. And it's like, well, why do you need to have that word, But it works, You have, the language is so interesting. There are all these words that exist in some language that aren't as satisfying in others, Because it doesn't really capture the experience that you've been living. And certain languages don't have names for all the colors. And some languages have words for colors that English doesn't have. So I think language is also pretty interesting. I had a patient once who said that his tonsils had gone down. And I was like, what do you mean your tonsils had gone down? They can't go down. They're there, And he said, oh, but in my country, you say that your tonsils go down when you have a strep throat. And I said, that's interesting, because in English or in Swedish, you would say that your tonsil, well, it would be more like your tonsils have become swollen or have grown or gone up, you know? And so our sense of direction is different because of our language. Anyway, I'm going on a really big tangent about language. This Exerbia guy also made a video about language, but it's also really interesting about aliens and how we wouldn't be able to communicate with aliens because, well, language. And like you would need that certain kind of psychology in order to even understand how to communicate between the different species. We can't even communicate with animals, so how could that even work, you know? Because we're so different as beings. Maybe they wouldn't even be interested in communication at all as we see it. So yeah, I think that all of this is coupled to how we can't really translate like experience and consciousness. We can fall back on certain scientific logical concepts and the scientific method, but when it comes to the brain, we're just not going to come there, you know? When it comes to cognition, we can understand it to a certain point, but we can't understand it more than that. Yeah, it's really interesting. So that was about those videos. Then I wanted to talk about, I have a lot more to say. I watched Joshua L. because a lot of people have been recommending Joshua L. since I started like talking about MBTI on this channel, which was maybe 6 months ago. People have been recommending Joshua L, and people have been disappointed I haven't talked about Joshua L. So I'm doing it now, 17 minutes into this video. Okay. I really like Joshua L. He's an INTP. And the way he talks in his videos is like, I love it. It's the NETI stuff, you know, I love it. And well, please watch Exerb's videos because they're also really NE heavy. And it's just a ramble that just, he uses so many complex words, you know. And Joshua L. I'm talking about Joshua L now. Joshua L. He's rambling, but he's saying all of this compact stuff. Like in a minute, he can fit in so many concepts, you know. And he just goes on a rant and goes. And he talks about the phenomenology of INFPs. And he really understands like what INFPs are for, you know? And he talks about consciousness and how INFPs are like kind of the masters of consciousness. Like that is what we specialize in. We just love finding out more about the human condition and seeking that out. And how we're just seeking all the time about that. I think that INTPs in general like see that in INFPs because Love Who has also talked about this, how INFPs are seeker of qualitative truth, not like objective logical truth. Well, it's more of a qualitative truth about the human condition and about themselves, and seeing everything through their own lens. And I think that what happened with Joshua L is that he wanted to couple MBTI with neuroscience, like Dario Nardi did with Enneagram. And he realized that this was bullshit. Basically, you can't really do that with MBTI. You can't do that with a lot of psychological models. Because you'd be missing a lot of the qualitative stuff. This is where Renaud Contini also, he took the opposite kind of route, where he wants to describe the phenomenology of INFJs. That's why he wrote his Ecstatic Soul book, which I haven't read. Now I bought his other book for some reason, but the Ecstatic Soul is supposed to be about what an INFJ, how it feels like to be an INFJ, basically. How the structure of the INFJ, not just in terms of cognition, but like how that would manifest in a person, you know? And he talks about that in his videos a lot, about how, well, MBTI, maybe the root for MBTI isn't about becoming as scientific as possible, because at a certain point you'd be losing a lot of experience of the types if you only focus on the numbers, on the statistics, on what people put in questionnaires, or what is testable or provable. Sometimes certain things can't be really provable, and he says that, like, for something to be true, it has to be, you have to be able to disprove something in order for it to, like, actually hold any meaning, you know. Otherwise it's just, we have to be careful, you know, basically, about what is a lie and what is truth. But you have to think a little bit that certain qualities cannot be described in any way by science, at least for the moment. And it cannot be translated well into words either. And you need a lot of languages, a lot of advancement in science and in linguistics, and all sorts of facts and theories and everything, in order to get to a point where we actually comprehend consciousness. And once we comprehend consciousness, wouldn't we be nostalgic for a time where we didn't understand? Isn't the mystery of consciousness kind of inspiring? So I really, really love that video because it ends on that note, and I'm going to end on that note too. And I think that is something that is in both of those videos. I also want to add another recommendation, which is the book Northern Lights, and the series His Dark Materials, by Philip Pullman, where the consciousness is, like, your soul is a little animal that is outside of you. And it talks about how, like, being separated from your soul would basically be like being, like, empty, you know. There's a lot of that kind of theme in stories, you know. There's the Dementors in Harry Potter that suck your soul out and everything. But I think that His Dark Materials does it best, because people in those books really have different ideas about, like, how to utilize the connection between soul and material, which in the books are called dust. And that they're trying to understand that in the whole book, and the whole 3 books that comprise the series are trying to understand dust, which is the link between consciousness and or like the soul and the human. And I think that those videos, Joshua L. and Exerbia, talk about this all in different perspectives, and it just is really inspiring to me, because that is really what I think that life is all about. So tell me what you guys think. Please watch those videos I'm recommending down in the description. And yeah, have a great day, everybody. Bye.